Okay, so this is my friend Monica, and you want to say hi?
Yeah, hey everyone.
So she agreed to have a chat about her sort of history with spirituality, awakening, meditation, Buddhism, whatever, and we'll we'll start maybe if you want to just give a little introduction about what you do now. I know you're a art teacher, but if you want to just give very simple background about who you are and maybe how we met and
Yeah, sure, yeah. So my name is Monica. I'm 30 years old and I am a full-time art teacher, working in public schools. And I met Angelo, we met like 3 years ago about maybe, and my
yeah, I would say
boyfriend,
so.
yeah, my boyfriend introduced me to your videos and to your book specifically. Um, and at that point in my practice I was like very interested in like what awakening and enlightenment actually meant within my lived experience. Um, it was like this nagging voice in the back of my head. I had to look there, you know. I had practiced for close like 8 years within a different tradition.
Hmm.
And I don't, I could go into that, but like I think it's maybe not as necessary. But it definitely laid a lot of groundwork in terms of like my orientation, in terms of like a Mahayana view, and a dedication to daily practice, and
Hmm.
um, cultivating this wish to awaken for
Hmm.
sure. But it like was developing in a way where it was, um, I think, missing like the essence of the true inquiry of like what's going on here, what's causing me suffering, what's going to lead to freedom. It was more at that time involved with like service to others, and sense of devotion to the practice, to the lineage, um, recitation of mantras, prayer, those types of things.
Hmm.
And so like it definitely was helpful, like in a way,
Hmm.
because it helped me just, yeah, develop some consistency, you
Hmm.
know. Um, but then that when I really started branching out and being like, okay, well, what is this idea of enlightenment, and why
Hmm.
is it causing me so much suffering?
Mm.
Like,
The idea itself was causing you suffering.
yeah, oh, for
Hmm.
sure,
Hmm.
massive amounts of suffering.
Tell
And
me about that.
oh my God, it took so the whole idea of like pragmatic dharma. I know
Hmm.
I've mentioned that to you, like before, but that
Hmm.
like, it's like that's how I felt like your spirit of pointing has been, like really look into your own experience. So like I started meditating online with a bunch of different groups of people, and while I was meditating and pushing and like really trying to like figure this whole puzzle out, um, I started to realize that the whole idea of like an enlightenment out there somewhere, like, um, that Buddha is this like glowing, floating monk, body of light that, if I'm really dedicated, really hard, I can get there. Like
Hmm.
it was creating this sense of I'm here and the goal is over there,
Yeah.
and I need to work really hard to get there. And it started to show up. Like I was be like it I went through multiple retreats during the pandemic. Like I did some uh like month-long retreats because we
Hmm.
were locked inside, and I was like, well, what else am I going to do with my time? I'm going to meditate
Hmm.
every waking hour.
Yeah. Right.
So it was a great use of time, but like during one of the months of the retreat that I was in at home doing it, all this tension and striving came forward, like so much of it. And like it manifested physically in my body, and like all this tightness and tension, and then like all the like paranoia that went with all this tension and contraction. And it was it was definitely something that I had to learn about and through and decondition a lot.
It was surprising, yeah? I mean, you're like, where did this come from?
Well, it came from, I knew it came from like the 8 years of my relationship to like the practice.
Hmm.
I knew it came from them. At that point, 3 years ago, I was like, okay, this is why this is happening. So,
You mean like an identity? Like you've had an identity around that that's letting go and that's uncomfortable, essentially? Okay. I just want to make sure I know what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, right, right, right. Yeah, there
Yep.
was like a period of like intense grief,
Hmm.
like thinking that I had to let go of this idea of what that practice would be. There was
Hmm.
like a lot of emotion around it.
Such a profound thing to say. Because you're not the Lone Ranger with that. I bump into a lot of people who have maybe traditional Dharma backgrounds or backgrounds in a spiritual group, often but not always with a very central teacher, and a very strong community and a very, I don't want to say inbred, that would be judgmental, but a community that's very tightly knit together. And you kind of internalize that you're part of that. And that's feels like what spirituality is, sort of. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that the community that I was practicing with previously was very much like that.
Hmm.
It was very much like be happy all the time. Like let's not really explore our emotions. You know, um, if you're not happy, it's probably just because you don't have enough faith.
Hmm.
Like a lot of
Merit.
like,
Need to get more
yeah,
merit.
the merit, the merit train. Yeah, collect all of it that you can. Just like scoop it in, like
Yeah.
it's real money.
See, this stuff fascinates me because you could blame it on a group or you could blame it on a tradition, but it's also very human. It's just the way our human minds see the world. Like I have a underlying feeling of I'm not good enough somewhere, and I may not even be aware of that. And I'm going to make myself good enough by working really, really hard at something, and earning what? I don't know, the respect of the group, earning spirituality, earning merit, and hopefully 10 lifetimes from now, earning awakening or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and it was like partly driven by this like lack of self-love, definitely, and I'm definitely still working on that. I think that's like an ongoing thing. But also it was also driven by like intense fear, which is paradoxical, it seems like. Um, the idea around like rebirth according to like traditional Buddhist ideology and like hell realms and all this existential fear stuff. I felt like there is or was a time limit to a sense of pressure, like a
Hmm.
lot of expectation that I was putting on myself, both so that I could feel loved and validated, but also so that I could get somewhere in time before horrible things happened.
Hmm.
So it was a great way to suffer a lot. Yeah.
It's so fascinating because, regardless of how someone comes to that precipice,
Hmm.
and part of coming to that precipice is just realizing what you said, that this actually may be available in this lifetime for me. That's a different way of looking at it and a different way of
Yeah.
feeling it. But regardless how someone comes to that, which is a lot of different ways,
Hmm.
it comes with a big emotional, um, I don't
Um,
know, something coming to the surface. A lot of emotional stuff coming to the surface that
um,
sort of seems associated with that storyline, but also sometimes isn't.
right.
But it happens and it surprises people. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially um well, there's a lot of story making that can happen about why that is, but in the West, there's a lot of societal conditions of like why, one is not good enough and why we have to work really hard to, you know, be alive or be,
Hmm.
be. Um, but so yeah, I think the major shift between the practice that practice and more of the pragmatic approach was like the curiosity and like the willingness to like look at things I hadn't looked at before,
Mm.
which is I think the biggest key, you
Can you tell
know.
me more about the curiosity? What is required for that, or what felt new about that or different?
Yeah, I think I slowly started to fall in love with understanding how the mind works. It's really fascinating, and complex, and but also like you can see relationships, right? And that's like the doorway into being able to like learn through being aware, you know, like what happens if this happens, what happens
Mm.
with that, you know, how am I relating to this, and the curiosity within like, first it started off as like a gross curiosity, right? Because I
Hmm.
had been so insulated in this one tradition for so long that I was like, okay, what other practices are there? What are other teachings? Who are other teachers? And I think allowing myself to like not feel bad about like exploring and trying different things was really beneficial. Um, the curiosity was is and was leading me more to myself, you know. Yeah. And all the teachers who helped me, including you along the way, have like really helped encourage me and pointed me in that direction. And I think, you know, because of conditioning and because of the lack of love or that I felt towards myself, or just like all this devotion previously, it's like it was and is a gradual process to like trust myself, you
Hmm.
know, look inside and like really see what is my own experience telling me,
Hmm.
um, and and learning from that and letting that be my teacher, um, and that was like a gradual trust building process,
Hmm.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah, that trust, I love that. When you say trust yourself, what resonated with me was not necessarily with my own experience years ago, um, was not so much trust some beliefs I have about myself, but more like trust that I actually have the capacity to introspect.
Uh-huh.
Trust that something about the way I'm perceiving reality right now can be turned inward.
Yeah.
And it's valuable to do that. And I've always wanted to do that. I
Right.
just never, no one really said, do that.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, totally. And there's a lot of ways that we can distract ourselves from doing that.
Hmm.
I think curiosity also is like a sense of openness of being like, okay, I might not find exactly what I'm expecting. Like curiosity definitely demands like a sense of like, well, what is going to happen, you know, like what is there to find, and that makes it really fun because then you're surprised and you don't know, and
Mm.
that's what kept me kind of like engaged, you know, and
Yeah.
realizing like I'm really learning about myself, I'm really learning about my own mind, like this is cool, you know. That
Mm.
was Yeah, that was a really big shift in the practice,
You
and
know,
like,
and
yeah,
I love that. I was going to say, as you're, I don't want to like jump ahead, but
yeah, yeah,
I can feel into how that flows. And at first, it's this curiosity about yourself and giving yourself permission to be curious about yourself, your internal process, your most fundamental experience.
mhm,
But at first, you don't always realize you're also becoming curious about reality itself, that those
yeah,
aren't actually apart from one another. I mean, we'll
right,
get to that. But
right,
that's that. As you give yourself permission to have that fascination and curiosity and to embody it, things start opening in ways you just cannot expect.
yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
it feels okay. Not only okay, it feels like quite an adventure.
Yeah, it feels like an adventure and you feel like you're going in the right direction because it's the direction you hadn't gone yet.
Hmm.
It's the direct Every other direction I've gone except for that way.
It's we're almost set up to not go in that direction in a way. Like the mind identified world of social
Uh,
conditioning kind of says, okay, let's look everywhere but there. For some reason,
mhm,
it's just
mhm.
sort of set up that way.
Yeah.
I want to say for anyone watching this too, because I always gear these toward anyone who could be watching this who can relate. When I met you, I'll just give you a reflection as far as
Sure.
practice and stuff. So when I met you, my reflection on you would be, you stood out as someone who works really, really hard, like at everything, but particularly this Dharma thing. Like you worked really hard, You meditated for long periods, even by yourself. You had a pretty amazing capacity to do that. So you were very work ethic oriented, which is great. Um, and you were smart, but you weren't overly intellectualizing this stuff. But interestingly, you were really identified with the hard work,
Yeah.
and that's a double edged sword, of course. But very dedicated and a very dedicated person. Like I can see how that devotional movement over several years had really seeped in, which is good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely helps because it helped in one way because it made me like it's totally a double-edged sword because what I'm about to say was like, well, that's also why I didn't see it for so long.
Yeah.
But it's like the dedication. I think it really transformed when it was dedication to like, uh, yeah, it's just hard because like I don't. I think eventually when I was like, like it both helps, but also when there gets to a point where it's just causing suffering, that's when you're like, okay, I can't do that anymore. I
Yeah.
need, and then your mind realizes there's another option that's way
Hmm.
better. It's like,
Yes.
okay, so then you can finally put it down.
So it brings me to this thing about fixation, and when I'm working with somebody, I just feel like a fixation somewhere, and then I help the person we kind of together sort of undermine it, and then
Right.
they're clear, and then something else comes. With
Mhm.
you, it was interesting because it was a kind of an uncommon one that I've encountered, and it kind of went like this. You're like, well, Angela, what else can I do? And in my mind, I'd be like, well, you're already doing like more than I would expect you to do, and it's almost like, man, I don't know what to tell you to do in a way, but
Mhm.
I could feel where the fixation was, and it was in a sense around working. It was around working so hard at it, and sometimes you just have to exhaust that. You have to, especially if you have that kind of energy, which you do, you have that drive. You have to exhaust the drive and really see. This is how koan works. This is how mu works. You have to see like you really come to the end of what you can do, and you can't fake that either. You can't just go,
Yeah.
okay, well I give up and let's just see what happens. Well,
Yeah.
that's not going to work.
I wouldn't be satisfied with
Right.
that. And I think that's why I continue to push and work hard because it's like your mind knows when it's hit something true or when it hasn't. And so
Yes.
it's like I would I just kept going but also what I think perpetuated it is my ego started to build up around this idea of being a spiritual person
Hmm.
and like that reified it more to then work hard more in a way. It seems like there was a connection there. Um, but um, I mean, I don't know if you want me to jump ahead at this point, but
Well, maybe just give me some sense of anything that you noticed that was changing over the last couple of years in
oh
your
yeah,
perception, in your practice,
totally.
in your approach.
Yeah, okay. Other things that have really helped me because this is like they talk about like the gradual path. It was very gradual for me, like very, very gradual.
Hmm.
Um, I think the thing that in the last 3 to 6 months that has really benefited me is this inspiration and like gratitude towards other practitioners who are on the path, who have been practicing and who've had insight because I really started to believe that it's possible, and
Hmm.
like it, it, it like I didn't realize how much of an impact it was making on my mind to be like this is something that other people have seen and it's possible and it's like not uncommon, and it just gave me a sense of gratitude and a sense of community in a way that was like not so insulated or localized as the previous community but more of like a common like humanity of sense of inspiration and spirit. And so like I was reflecting on that a lot over the
Mm.
last 3 months, and it really really inspired me. Um, and I think it ultimately also helped me to be able to let go more in a way.
Mm.
Not in like an active way, but just in a way of like, okay, it's just a sense of confidence, I
Yes.
guess. Yeah.
I think that's like the deeper meaning of Sangha.
Yeah.
there's a potential downside to sangha, like group thinking and group dynamics and group
Right.
fixation.
Yeah, yeah,
But when you really start giving yourself to this process, like you're walking with the ancients, like you know what it means to be walking in the patriarch and matriarchal footsteps of this process, and you feel it energetically, something beyond this lifetime. Yeah, and it's very powerful, and it's sublime, and it's humbling.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's very humbling, and it's very inspiring, and it's I'm just filled with gratitude, and it really it makes me want to like continue the path so
Mm-hmm.
that I can continue it by walk it for other people too.
Mm-hmm.
Like that sense of gratitude is definitely gonna continue to motivate me to practice.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what else happened?
Um. Let's see. Okay, so the other thing that I mentioned was like the trusting of my intuition. Like that definitely helped within the last 6 months too. I started gravitating towards teachers that like just felt a connection with,
Mm-hmm.
that I liked talking to. They weren't even telling me anything
Mm-hmm.
specific, really. You know, they weren't telling me, like, all right, do this practice like this many times a day. They were actually way less instructive in a way. They were again pointing me to my own experience, telling me to trust myself, which to me was like so radical because I was like, wow, they really trust me. Like, wow, maybe I could trust myself now.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was really good. And so I like kind of just started doing like more of an open awareness type practice, which
Mm-hmm.
was it was felt great. It felt good. And I think it just continued to solidify the sense of like being comfortable with my own mind and trusting my own mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then in relationship to that, I had recently signed up for a meditation retreat because I love going on retreat. You know, it's a time when the mind really clarifies and you can like see things more clearly. Sometimes it's uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, you know, but always I feel like it's part of like developing myself and my practice. And usually it feels good, even though
Mm-hmm.
some parts can be uncomfortable. Usually it can feel really good. And this past retreat that I just went on was a shamatha practice. So like
Mm-hmm.
it's called unification of mind, which I appreciate because it wasn't called concentration. It was called like unification. So how to bring my mind into more of like a sense of stillness and calm and ease, which is very opposite of working very hard. Is
Mm-hmm.
what I found out.
Yeah.
You know, um, for a long time, like you know, the basic like meditation on the breath,
Mm-hmm.
like I couldn't do it
Oh,
because
I
I
feel you. I always had trouble with the breath meditations. I never under.
yeah,
Yeah, I get it now, but I
yeah,
couldn't do it as a practitioner
right.
trying to get somewhere or whatever. It
Uh-huh.
was just I don't know why it felt too dualistic or too
Yeah,
confusing or what am I supposed to
uh-huh.
do? And like the breath
Totally.
just wants to breathe. It doesn't want to be controlled. I didn't get it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Right. So my approach to it for years has been like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna like put all my attention on the breath and I'm
Hmm.
gonna breathe here. And so that always ended in like a lot of suffering and pain. And you know, I never really could figure out the balance of how to do that, to apply just the right amount of effort, but not too much effort, and how to
Yeah.
let go in that whole process. So um because my practice over the last few months have been like developing and like been more relaxing, I was like, okay, well, now I know shamatha is all about ease and like relaxing, and that
Mm.
sounds really nice. So I went on this 6 day retreat, and just a lot of ease was coming up, and a lot of ease and a lot of some difficult stuff actually did come up, but um, again, just like really grateful and just like that it was happening, and again was able to get back into more of a sense of ease. So I think that's one thing, you know, confronting suffering on all the different levels along this way was never fun in a way. It's
Yeah.
like it sucks, but it was like important to
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
So, because otherwise it just keeps going. So I did have some stuff that came up that was like, um, you know, just looking at my conditioning about like why or how I've been pushing and like how that results in my practice. And that
Hmm.
was really interesting because I was like, oh, the stuff my family has been saying about me for years is actually true. It's really funny. Like, oh, this is why I worked so hard, or this is how I've been relating to this experience that then tries to push this away or create this for me.
Can
Um,
you say something about how seeing this like repressed emotional material
uh-huh.
from this place of ease that you're describing more recently versus maybe in the past when it was in the context of just pushing really hard?
Yeah,
Is it easier to I don't know, embody
yeah.
or is there just a realization you don't really have to do anything with it other than actually acknowledge it and feel it
Yeah.
and so forth? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the non-doing aspect of the shamatha was like it brought it up because the mind was still, and it was like, okay, this just needs to be seen. Like
Mm,
it really just needs to be seen and acknowledged and just not suppressed again.
mm,
Like,
yeah.
that was a confusing part around the path of practice for me is like, well, what if, if there's no me, then why don't I just like totally suppress me, you know, and like why don't I just like not be mean, but kind of be mean,
Hmm.
in a way that was like I'm gonna work so hard that I get rid of it. That was
Hmm.
confusing for a long time, and
The ego's version of no self realization.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. It just creates more problems because then there's more conflict. But anyway, and then you try to explain it and all this stuff, but it's just a relationship to memories,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And that was the thing. I was like, oh great, this is great because I can revisit this experience and how I'm relating to it, and like give myself forgiveness for like pushing it down, or for not acknowledging it, or just like relate to it in a different way, recognizing that it's still a story and still a memory,
Hmm.
and that felt really, really, really good.
Mm.
And I wasn't expecting that in that retreat. And you know, from what I understand, it's like as the path continues, like you've kind of talked about this like emotion work, or like shadow work. I was like, oh, this is probably what shadow work is.
Mm. Yeah.
I was
But
like,
doing it in a really integrated way. It sounds like, which is awesome. Hmm.
yeah,
You start to love the shadow. The shadow material is just parts of yourself that have been there the whole time. They've been operating. They've just been sort of cut off from the consciousness we're identifying with, the aspects of
right,
ourself we're identifying with, and
right,
that's the shadow identity in a way. And in a lot of ways, it runs the show.
yeah,
Um, so.
yeah,
So I was curious, would you say something about, because you've done a lot of long retreats, even
uh-huh.
self-imposed long
Mhm,
retreats and so forth, early
mhm,
on, would you give anyone who's interested or curious about doing retreat or hasn't done it, like some either advice, pluses and minuses, or how you would orient them if they're considering it?
mhm. Yeah, interesting. Well, it definitely depends on the person in terms of like where they are in their practice. I feel like um, definitely develop a home practice before you go on retreat, right? Whether it's like 30 minutes of sitting a day or an hour a day, I think doing that consistently is going to really help someone who's going on retreat, because usually retreats are structured where you meditate all day long.
Hmm.
So it's a lot of meditation if you don't have a regular practice. That's definitely one thing to do before you go on retreat. Um, the other thing I think with retreat is like to be, I'm going to say this now, but to be really gentle with yourself, you know, because you get more out of it. You get a lot more out of it if you're gentle. you know, like you don't need to like berate yourself to go meditate. Doesn't help. Yeah, does not help. Because your mind just gets tense, and the whole point of the path is to find freedom and happiness and ease and openness. And it's like if your meditations are going in that direction, even if difficult things come up, you're going in the right direction, right?
That is a
So
really, really good point.
yeah, well, my teacher tells me that, so
No,
I'm
it's
like,
beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely has. It's been a really good compass for me recently. You know, like okay, is this leading in the right sense of well-being? Great, good. I'm gonna encourage that. You know,
Hmm.
and or is this like, is this, you know, if it's not, then that's not right. It's not the
Hmm.
not the best way to practice. So, um, in terms of retreat too, there's so many different ways you could do it. It just really depends on what your time frame is, like how much time you have off
Hmm.
from work to be able to set aside. Um, but I would say anyone who's like really curious about the mind and how it works, like retreats are the best place because it's like a laboratory, right? You
Hmm.
get to isolate all these different variables that you can't usually in your daily life, right? You can you know, if you have kids, you can get away from the kids for a while. If you know, if you have work, you don't get to check your emails, right? You put up a little thing out of office, and you really limit your distractions so you can really go deeper within your own mind. And the result is that you learn a lot about yourself, and usually you develop a lot of clarity and peace. Um, and it's very rewarding.
Hmm.
And I think that's why I kept doing it, because even though sometimes I didn't have the right amount of effort, or it was or difficult things came up, or I learned about myself, it was still always like, wow, that was a great use of my time.
Mm, I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah,
Yeah, I find, there are points during retreat where almost everyone can relate to. You think like, I can't get beyond this. I don't even know what's going. I mean, this is just too painful. And then 30 minutes later, your mind state shifts and you're in peace. But
yeah,
I've never that I can think of, with maybe one exception of someone who I'm not sure came for the right reason, but pretty much by the end of a retreat, and especially a week after, people are always grateful they did it. They're like, I don't know how I got myself to do that, but I'm so glad I did.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's quite a process to go through, and it can be disorienting and so forth. But boy, it's worth it. You know.
yeah, definitely. I heard this great analogy that I'll share. I didn't make it up, but I really think it's a good analogy for retreat, which is I think it. Yeah, maybe I can look up who said it later and let you know. But they say that retreat is like going scuba diving with like an air tank on your back and with flippers, but you're walking into the ocean from the beach backward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because you have
Yeah.
to let your flippers, you have to walk backwards so your flippers don't trip you up. So you're like walking in kind of blind. You don't really know what to expect. And you go, your feet get wet and you're like, oh, it's kind of cold. Okay, I'm going to keep going. And then like you get to a point where all these waves start crashing on you and you're like uncomfortable because there's no AC in your retreat room, or because like you don't have Wi-Fi and you're like really like worried that you didn't tell someone something, and you have
Hmm.
all this distraction, you know, and then eventually you get deep enough where you go through all this like roughness that you can turn around and actually submerge underneath the water, and it gets very calm and very peaceful and very blissful,
Mm.
and and that's when it really gets good.
And you look around and you're in an amazing environment, right? And you
Yeah,
feel like what an opportunity to see this and feel this. Yeah.
yeah,
That's a
yeah,
great analogy.
yeah, I like it too.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe Jack Cornfield said it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I guess we can fast forward a little bit to what you said to me the other day, which is
Uh-huh.
actually why I said, well, let's do a video.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it was really cool the way this played out, or the way I remember you describing it.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's something leading up to that as well you might want to talk about, but.
Yeah, well, there was a little bit. So like I left the retreat, and I just felt really good about the whole experience. And I went and stopped by and had lunch with a Dharma friend on the way home, and just sat with and talked about Dharma with him for like a couple hours before driving home again. And I don't know. Again, I think that's again that like confidence in the sangha,
Hmm.
that I was talking about earlier. Like just having friends where you can talk about dharma and truth and insights. It's been really valuable to me recently. And then like having that conversation and again inspired me and started helping me think about just different concepts around who I am and what reality is, right? So I was like in a shamatha retreat, which is like stillness. You don't really want to investigate in a shamatha you in a retreat as much. You want to try to calm and still and unify the mind when you're developing your samadhi. So then like I'm out of the retreat driving home, and I'm like driving, so it's like a 5-hour drive home and I'm just staring at the highway, right? um, but now all my investigation faculties are kind of kicked up, and I'm like contemplating the sense of specifically like craving and tightness that did come up during the retreat, right? Like the doer, the pusher, the sense of pushing and pulling, like trying to get something, right? And so I'm start looking at this because at certain points in my retreat it would come up really strongly, and at other points in the retreat it would just like go away,
Hmm.
and it would be like whoa, like it feels like a whole fog went out, like went away from me. um and then it would come back, and then I'd feel in my body, and then it'd go away. So like when I was driving, I was like, what the hell is this,
Hmm.
the teachers kept being like, let go on the retreat. And they kind of talked about it with really helpful analogies and dharma stories, which I found useful. But then I started like really like chewing on that concept myself. Like, what does it mean to let go? What does it mean? What does that really mean? What does that really look like? You know, like, can I let go? How do I let go? Can I like, how can maybe if I don't let go, maybe if I don't try to let go, maybe if I try to let go, but I try to, all these mental gymnastics, like trying to figure out exactly what is the letting go piece there,
Hmm.
and like how to do it or not do it. And while I'm thinking all these different things and investigating this, I'm also watching the sense of craving, wanting something, how it manifests in my body, how unpleasant certain moves are in my mind, um, how when certain thing how what happens when I relax, what happens to my body and my mind when I relax. um, and so eventually it got to the point where it was like, oh, all of this is also centered around a sense of somebody doing all these things, right? And it's all tied into this idea of craving for somebody, by somebody. And my mind was like, oh, that's what we're gonna let go of now.
Hmm.
and and then it was like, oh, it was really weird. It was like, I wish I wish I thought it was gonna be like a firework display of the cosmos opening. When you hear people talk about like awakening or waking up, you think like the heavens part and like you're blinded by light. It's not that at all. Oh my God, it's not that at all. It was just like the mind shrugging, like, okay, whatever.
Hmm.
Just like, okay. And like just deciding like that wasn't helpful anymore to
Did
relate to
something
that.
fundamentally change, would you say?
I think so, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, the sense of, and then I started investigating further once like all this sense of like personhood kind of lifted off of me.
Hmm.
And so I
Oh,
started,
just that.
yeah, yeah, just that. It was funny because like it definitely, the big thing, like, oh, this is a big shift, wasn't necessarily the lack of personhood, even though that was pretty obvious. It was also like the huge decrease in suffering,
Hmm.
like the sense of, like, somebody opened a window in my experience, and it's just like breezy now. And that sense of being able to like put down all this striving and craving and clinging, it it's way it's a lot of that is gone, which is good.
What
um
I'm
and
picking up and kind of reflecting from my own time of going through this years ago is the feeling of having to manage everything and all that management pointing back to something you never really looked to see if it was there
yeah,
is just suddenly kind of gone.
yeah,
There's like a spontaneity that's just here.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's nice.
It is really nice.
Hmm.
And yeah, I've also just like seen, like, has it been persisting? Because it's really easy to get like certain glimpses or tastes of things, and then be like, okay, let me grasp onto that and start
Yes.
craving that, and all that. And I definitely did that previously. So I'm also just kind of wary of it. I'm still gonna like continue to look. Um, and it's interesting because I definitely can see that there are like levels of awakening,
Hmm.
because it seems like a bunch of self view has gone, but that there are definitely certain mental movements or certain things that come up where the sense of self kind of gets stronger, you
Yeah.
know? Um, so it's not like there's like no sense of self at all,
Right.
but which is also something I thought. I think the thing that really kept me suffering for a long time was all the expectations I had around what awakening was,
Yeah.
and
That's why I give disclaimers constantly. I say, look this way, look here, look there, but it's not quite like that either.
yeah.
There's such a freedom and such a spontaneity in reality, in
Mhm.
whatever this is. We don't have to call it
Mhm.
reality even.
Mhm.
It's like it's just so beautiful and so simple, and free. Um,
Yeah, yeah. It definitely is nice. It's a big relief to be like, okay, there might still be story, but I totally don't believe it, and it's so refreshing. Just like a
mm,
huge relief, like a huge
yeah,
weight off my shoulders. Like, I don't have to manage anything anymore. I don't have to manage my awakening. I don't have to manage my practice anymore. Like, I'm very confident. I'm very like very grateful that now the the practice is going to unfold in a way, like, I'm because I have this confidence, and because it's not going to be me doing it
yes,
you know
yeah. That's the whole key to this insight is like you're not primary anymore. It's the dharma. You call it
Right,
whatever you want. There's
right.
something here that's just so incredibly alive and
Yeah,
mysterious,
yeah.
and that's the context for everything.
Mhm.
So even
Mhm.
then, it's like whether you will or won't practice, I'm sure you will because that's how you're hooked up. But
Yeah.
the whole cosmos isn't in balance on that.
Right,
It doesn't
right.
actually matter that much,
Oh my
if
god.
at all.
Right. Yeah, I remember you saying certain things, and like, oh, it doesn't really matter if you practice or you don't practice. And I'd be like, Angela, what are you saying to these people? Of course it matters. You have to work really hard.
Yeah.
And like, I think that if that's your inclination, you should do that.
Hmm.
And it's because, eventually you'll find relief from that,
Hmm.
which is, you
Well,
can
the
only.
thing is, it's funny is like people can identify as the practicer practitioner, but they can also identify as like the one who doesn't want to do anything, the one that doesn't
Right,
want to practice. So that's
right.
totally the wrong message for that
Yeah,
person.
yes,
This is just completely ineffable. What we're
true.
talking about is beyond. It's just so beyond in a way, but it's also so intimate and just right here
Hmm.
that any word could be confusing, any pointer could be confusing.
Yeah,
But once you
really,
know,
totally
once you know
essential.
it, you know it. It's like
Right, right.
click, so simple. Um,
Yeah.
I like the word grace for that. because it's undeserved in a sense, right? And sometimes you have to work really hard to exhaust yourself for it to just hit you over the head
Mm.
or whatever.
Yeah.
But I
Mm.
like how your inquiry towards the later portion of like just the last few weeks or whatever. That's
Mhm.
the sweet spot that I try to sort of get people to is like,
Yeah.
yeah, struggling's fine, all that working hard. Like if you have to do all that, that's fine. But what I really mean by practice and inquiry is kind of like what Dogen meant, I think, when he said practice enlightenment. It's
Mm.
the joy and the ecstatic just love of for reality of truth of mind and
Mhm.
the ability to just investigate it
Yeah.
with a humble curiosity. That's practice. It's not
Yeah.
pushing yourself hard, beating the shit out of yourself, judging yourself,
No.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, and with that said, yeah, I think some sort of stable practice can be helpful of meditation daily and so forth. But
Mhm.
it's really when you get to that sweet spot of inquiry, and you become you give yourself permission to be genuinely curious, and and start to approach it from the way nature approaches everything, which is with spontaneity.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a great description of practice. And, I come from more of a traditional Buddhist background, so it's like it makes sense, Sometimes they'll describe like these different factors of awakening, right? And it's like tranquility, like that sense of stillness, and then like
Hmm.
equanimity, like being okay with like whatever, and then um investigation, like actually looking at your experience and being curious about it. That's like another factor. Joy, like being
Hmm.
joyful about the practice, and enjoying it, right? Like all of these factors help balance the mind so that it can look clearly at I like who am I and what is reality and what is causing me suffering.
Hmm.
And like then the mind will just see it. It's not like you will do anything. it's
Right.
it's just about creating that harmony in the mind so that the mind sees clearly, oh, this is a view that doesn't need to be around anymore.
Hmm.
And so it's just natural that it's going to let it go because the mind wants to be happy. Like we all want to be happy, right?
Hmm.
We all want freedom. The mind is inclined to go in that direction. So
Hmm.
it is very natural, and I think that tranquility really helped me, the sense of like at relaxing and ease. So if someone does work really hard, like trying to help, I would encourage them to like relax and enjoy the practice more,
Hmm.
and enjoy the peace and the ease that comes up with, and then investigate with that kind of relaxed attitude.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Uh,
So, what is this right here? What is this? What is this nature?
yeah, it's interesting. I can try to put a label on it, but
Right. But
it's
does that
another.
question, but more importantly, does that question cause you contraction?
um
Or like what is your response to even inquiring that way?
um uh my mind is pretty content to just like sit there
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
be.
Hmm.
I'm noticing like I like being alone more now.
Hmm.
Like I want to just be sitting and feeling and experiencing it. My mind
Hmm.
is also like thinking a lot still. Like there's still lots of thoughts. um
How is your relationship different with those thoughts now versus say, whatever, 6 months ago?
yeah, I don't believe them as much,
Hmm.
and there's still a tendency to want to push or pull on them though,
Hmm.
which is interesting.
Yeah.
It's still there. It's still there, like, but then I just try to relax and not do anything about it, and just be curious again, like still be
Hmm.
curious about my experience, but um yeah, I guess I'm just kind of watching everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great approach too with the pushing and pulling on thoughts when you see it and
Uh-huh.
you realize, oh, that's what I used to think I was. I
Mm.
was that pushing and I was identifying with that,
Whoa, that's trippy.
right? And so then when you see it, it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, where is that? What am I actually taking reference from when
Mhm.
I just even perceive pushing and pulling
Mhm.
in that moment? And it's like, oh, like you might start finding body centers and stuff that are literally energetically encoded and stuff.
Mhm.
But it all comes from a place of spontaneity and enjoyment of
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but there's also an element here that like both of us, neither one of us can actually talk about.
Mhm.
But the tasting of that for the first time in a way is so overjoying. It's such a marvelous opportunity to be alive just for that.
Yeah, I feel like crying. Yeah.
And that's what I want for anybody. That's why I point to this in the crazy goofy way I try to do it, but because I know if someone really starts getting oriented to that, they're in a good place. They might beat their head against the wall for 3 years to do it or whatever, but of course it's your birthright, you know.
Yeah, and like I've definitely had glimpses of this too. It
Hmm.
feels like if I had to put words on it, which is fun to try, but it's like, trying to it's almost like God manifesting
Hmm.
itself or like, like Buddha nature like manifesting itself. It's
Hmm.
like this amazing display of being present and just yeah.
Isn't it
And it
great?
yeah, it is great. And there were certain, and it feels really dreamlike, and it
Hmm.
feels like it feels like the mind is dreaming all of this up
Hmm.
just for the hell of it, and it,
Right.
you know, just so that there can be a sense of like community and a sense of connection.
Hmm.
Like why have different people in different experiences just so it can experience itself?
Hmm.
And it's really beautiful. And I definitely had it. The reason why I mentioned this too is because like definitely had experience of this
Yep.
before, and like um, sometimes it would scare me because it'd be
Hmm.
like overwhelming. But in the back of my mind, I was like, hey, wait a second. There's something to this
Yep.
because it's so direct. Um, it's everything, you
Yeah.
know, and
And that's the key is that for anyone listening is you will get those tastes, those
yeah,
experiences, and it is you are experiencing reality, living truth, the Dharma, Buddha nature, but it's still an experience. The key is the identity shifting.
yeah,
That this
that's the key. That
what
is,
what
yeah,
you are is that. There's no you could say you are or you're not. It doesn't actually matter, but there's no it's seamless.
right.
And that's the huge fucking relief, right? Like, oh my
That's the
God, you're
relief.
off the hook.
That's where all the suffering comes from. Is the
Hmm.
clinging and the attachment to who I am that is separate from everything else. And it's totally illusory and it creates so much problems and suffering and pain and isolation and when it's totally unnecessary.
Hmm.
You don't even need it to like
Yeah.
function or be a witness to this miracle. Like you don't need
Hmm.
any of it. And like that I think is just encouraging. So if anyone gets encouraged by this that it's possible and that it's you always say it's closer than close. It's just a matter of the mind looking clearly and then like accepting that that's the way things are actually and that it's
Hmm.
preferable, you
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm just so happy for you because you worked so hard. I mean, really, you did work so hard, and in a sense, you had to exhaust yourself. But yeah, I'm just happy for you.
Thanks, Angela. I am really grateful for you and, everyone who practices.
Yeah.
I'm just grateful for people's practice because, like, I'm definitely tuning into this understanding now of, like, oh, this is mind. This isn't my mind. This is just mind, right? And it's going to go through now that it's kind of seeing the freedom that's possible when it, like, lets go of certain of delusion or misunderstandings about the way things are. It's like, oh, okay, I want to do this, but I don't want to do it for me because it's like there's no me. So um, but I want to do it because it's like we're so all the same. We all have the same mind. At the very core, we have had different experiences, we have different thoughts and relationships, but at the end of the day, it's like there's all this, like, this sense of unity is like really profound. And it's really it's giving me like a deeper call to practice now, because it's like, oh, this isn't for me. This
Hmm.
is because every living being has this same mind and has that same ability they can tap into. So, I remember you sharing a little bit about like your practice and like where, in the past, and why you do these videos and things, and like it definitely resonates with me too. You know, uh, I think like the first 10 years of my practice was all that Mahayana Buddhism, like, and bodhicitta and all that, and I think it did help create this stream of karma now, that it's like, oh, okay, I see the value in continuing practice so that I can benefit other people,
Hmm.
even though there's like no real other, which is the funny thing.
Yeah.
But it still feels like, why don't they wake up too? Like, there's if I can aid in that in any way, that would be really amazing.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So cool.
yeah, it's very humbling,
Hmm. Yeah.
and it's
And you do,
exciting.
and so it's so beautiful because you do it whether you know it or not. And I think the deeper realization goes, the less you actually know it. It's strange, but you do
Okay.
benefit everyone, whether you overtly talk about it, teach the Dharma, or you just the way you walk through the world. And that's a very good way to transmit because it flies under the radar. It doesn't
Uh-huh.
engage the ego directly, and literally just the way you interact with people. Every
Uh-huh.
time you sit, every time yeah. That's the
Yeah,
big M mind.
yeah, that's awesome. That's a good point. I kind of picked up on that a little bit. Like when I was like walking around, like I'll look at people and I'll like see them in a
Hmm.
totally different way. And I'm like, oh shit, and like I feel really connected to them. And also I'll just share this one little story experience, but this neighbor nearby is just going through like a really hard time. And I was able to just, because there wasn't such a sense of self that was like aversive to the situation and his suffering, I was way more present with him, and
Mm.
like way actually able to listen,
Mm.
and like didn't feel like I had to fix it, which was great.
Hmm.
And I wasn't suffering during it. It was just like
Yeah.
real, like actual genuine compassion in a way that was like, oh, that's why awakening helps people, because it gets you out of the way so you can actually help people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can actually experience them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like really be with them.
Mm.
Be reality with them.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels really good. It feels really rewarding.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't really think of anything else to talk. I've come to like wordlessness with you with this because it's just so, it's not, I hesitate to even add any words to the whole thing, but of course, this will be helpful. This will be tremendously helpful to people. Everybody's different. Everybody has different personalities, characteristics, backgrounds, and
Yeah.
you never know who's going to relate to this video. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
get over the next year, I'm going to get comments. Oh my gosh, whatever it was about Monica, blah, blah,
Great.
blah. And I get it with every video of people I interview because
That's
we're
awesome.
just regular people.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I
yeah,
think. Yeah. Sorry.
yeah, super cool.
Yeah. I
Oh,
think like that's the biggest thing, is like that I think, I don't know if it held me back, but it really blinded me for a while, was like thinking that awakening was something that I was going to get, and it was like magic,
yeah,
you know. It's not. It's
right.
not that. It's
No.
not that. And I was striving for that. And that's what I was striving for, this idea of what it was. And so it you said this the other day. I just because we're on call right now, I just want to mention it. Like, you said this the other day in a voicemail message. You were like, "Yeah, now you can see paradoxes," and I was like, "Oh wow." it's total, like, it's true. I've been kind of investigating different paradoxes, and it's like there can both be selfing and an understanding that there's nobody there.
Hmm.
There can be um, compassion without suffering, right? That doesn't
Hmm.
even make sense.
Right.
There can be a conversation between two people, but it be one thing.
Hmm. There can
It's
be all of this seemingly going on right now and absolutely nothing happening at all.
and
Right?
like the right, and then like that's really palpable the moment things end. It's like, oh my god, it's totally gone.
Gone.
It's totally gone.
And
And
that's
that's
wonderful. We hesitate with loss and grief so much, but we don't realize like for something to absolutely just not be anymore, in a sense, is also creation. It allows being. That being and non-being are not two sides of the same coin. Even they are literally the same thing, just maybe expressed from a different view or something. But
uh-huh.
it's magical. The this this, and it's so paradoxical, beautifully, wonderfully paradoxical.
Yeah. And it is. And it is both like amazing because now there's so much less suffering, you know, but it's also paradoxical because it's like, well, I didn't do anything to get it. You
Yeah,
didn't get any, and I didn't get anything.
you didn't get anything.
And there's no one to do anything.
Yeah,
It's so bizarre.
right. But like you said a minute ago, you think you're going to get something. You think you're going to get the big tamale. The seeker thinks it's going to get the thing that finally makes it stop seeking because it's so satisfied. But that whole thing just keeps underpinning or emphasizing the sense that there's dissatisfaction in the first place. So you got to
Right.
go all the way back and find, well, who's the one that's dissatisfied?
Yeah.
Who's the one
Right.
that even believes in all of that pushing and pulling in the first place? And
Right.
you, like sometimes I say, it's like a clown holding a whole bunch of balloons on strings. You can sit there and pull and push on the strings and try to figure out what that's balloon, what's that balloon, what's that. But when you really, really finally look back to see the clown and you realize there is no fucking clown, the balloons just start floating away, and you're like, Jesus, oh my god. They're still there for a while. You might get entangled in the strings here and there, but you see there is no clown. There's nothing
Right.
holding it together. Yeah.
And I knew that, like I knew that intellectually,
Hmm.
right? I knew that, oh, there's nothing there. And I would just sit in silence and like, do some inquiry and be like, what is moo, or who's, or like who's thinking, and I'd be like I
Yeah.
just be like waiting to find something.
The mind turns nothing into something.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I can't wait to get me some of that nothing.
Right. That's it. I want that nothing. I
And
want
also, the mind can't see that nothing isn't only nothing. It it is nothing, and it's wholly nothing and fully nothing, but it's not only nothing. It can't be. There's nothing that's only.
right.
Fullness
Right.
is emptiness. Emptiness is fullness. Form is emptiness. It has to be. They're not. They're not two different expressions. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm this conversation and what you just said, and just like it makes me more curious, honestly, about everything. Like, okay, if this is just the mind unfolding, what the hell is going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what? I'm just curious. It just makes me more curious,
Mm-hmm.
and it also um, makes me want to relax more.
Mm-hmm.
Makes me want to like totally go into the senses and just be be sitting. You know.
Love it,
Yeah. Yeah. So.
man. So cool.
I'm very grateful. I'm also filled with lots of gratitude.
Yeah. Okay, Monica.
Yeah. Angelo,
Well,
thanks for talking with me.
oh, thanks so much for doing the interview, and we'll chat again sometime in this way. But yeah, all I can say is thanks for doing all the work. Thanks for trusting in something beyond yourself. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what it really comes down to.
Yeah, it does.
Trusting an instinct that was so quiet at times that the mind was making so much noise, but you still kept digging, orienting, and then finally relaxing enough to
Right.
fully engage,
Right.
living
Yeah.
truth. And yeah,
Well, yeah, just very grateful.
Me too.
All
Okay. Nice to see you.
right. Thanks, Angela. Have a great day.
Okay.
Say
You
hi to
too.
Violet for me and your
I
puppers.
will, for
Okay.
sure.